Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Ummahpreneur live podcast. And actually, I don't know if I can really call this a live podcast in this episode because this is going to be a series of episodes that I'm going to be recording privately with some of my favorite guests that have joined me on this podcast. The guests that have had so much experience and so much to say and really brought about topics that I thought would be interesting to bring up once more. And today I have with me none other than brother Tafazal Mohammed. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Welcome.
Really honored to be back here again.
The honor is definitely mine, brother. And I'm really excited because, just like I was telling you before we were going to record this, I want these episodes to be a little bit different than the ones we actually hold live. They're going to be a little bit more raw, a little bit more real. I don't really have a prepared set of questions today for you guys. So I'm actually just going to talk about whatever it is that comes to mind with Brother Tafazal. So I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. It might go in interesting places. So please tune in and let's see what we end up, where we end up going, inshallah. And I think the best place to start for those of our listeners who maybe don't know you or haven't listened to the previous episode, can you share with us a little bit of a brief on who you are and what you do, inshallah?
Yeah, sure. Thank you again, Brother Abi. I mean, a background from of myself. I mean, I'm a grandfather of 4. Alhamdulillah, I had a granddaughter actually a few weeks ago. A father of 5. Mashallah, married to my soulmate. I'm healthy. Alhamdulillah, everything's really, really great at the moment. Unfortunately, my wife had a COVID last week, and she's coming up with it right now. So
Really?
last 10 days were really tense because she's in the US at the moment. I'm in the UK.
Okay.
And she had to go to hospital a couple of times. So that was really tough. So yeah, it was really.
Wow, subhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant her shifa. Is she okay? Is she experiencing any symptoms or?
No, alhamdulillah, she did have lots of symptoms, yeah, and but she's kind of coming through slowly now. So alhamdulillah. So yeah, that's been kind of a test for me, I'd say. So a bit more of my background. I mean, I've done community development and youth work for 25 odd years. I've been a trainer, youth work trainer, community development and stuff. Worked particularly in the relationships field informally, actually, for many years, probably 10, 12 years. But I formalized the whole process about 2 years ago. So I've been kind of looking at, relationships, Muslims, inshallah.
MashaAllah. And I noticed that you've been gravitating towards that. The last time we talked on this podcast, your main focus and what I saw you working on primarily was really the development of Muslim men in general and coaching Muslim men. And now I can see that you're slowly taking that in the direction of helping prepare Muslims for relationships. So talk to me about that. Talk to me why you actually started gravitating towards that direction and why you felt it was important to talk about that with your clients.
Really good question, actually. So I do believe the nucleus of society is the family itself, and everything starts with the family. The family's good, the society is going to, inshallah, be good as well. And for me, being a Muslim man, I kind of know the journey that I've been through myself and the kind of work that I've had to do, the inner work. And that's taken some bravery, I think, on my part. I was very bold. I was a divorcee, so I had the stigma of being a Muslim, being a man, and being a divorcee as well. And it was a compounding effect, I'd say, upon myself. And I went through a bout of depression, I'll be honest with you. And one of the reasons was that I didn't have any men to speak to. Family are okay, but family have their own ways of dealing with things, and sometimes that can be very judgmental as well, in some cases. But when I came across a particular gentleman, he literally spent some time with me, 15 minutes, and that's all it took. And it was the first time I was able to really share my, I'd say, deep-seated emotional trauma. And that kind of was probably the beginnings of my passion for working with Muslim men, because I realized, actually, if that's a space I can hold for, if he can hold it for me, I can hold it for other men. And so, I've veered off into that direction of helping Muslim men to look to themselves and to be emotionally very stable, be able to share, their concerns, their hurdles, anything they have in terms of worries as well. And, a lot of the work that I came across was that Muslim men have troubled relationships, marriages, but I'm finding that even that's the case, we're very tough we're very tough as a gender, and not really forthcoming in the way we actually ask for help or seek help. So whilst that's the case, and I still have myself available for men should they wish to receive my support in their marriage, I kind of have pivoted in one way to look at how do I now prevent men from going down the same way before they get married.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how do I prepare men to be whole, to be emotionally intelligent, to be wise, to be strong, to be stable in many different ways, that when they actually get into a marriage, that they are as whole as can be. And that in and of itself is a field in itself. And I have an acronym ARC, ARK, uh, the process in which I actually work with men, and it works with married men as well, but
Mm-hmm.
particularly with singles, because there's a huge need for it. And I'll share some more information if you like, in that regard.
Yeah, please keep going. I'm loving this.
Sure. So this swiping right and swiping left.
Mm-hmm.
So it's somehow, if you swipe right and you come across someone, and in your eyes this person seems to be okayish, it's almost like, in a few seconds you're able to determine that this person could be your future spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as easy as that. It's not as simple as that. This swiping culture has taken over left, right, and it becomes almost like everything's detached. Like the feelings are detached. You don't know the person, and you're making this judgment within milliseconds. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and the thing is that I think this culture has taken over. It's prevalent, and I think it's taken over whereby I'm finding myself that some young men have been looking for years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking for years, and they're still not happy. And some of it's down to do with their own limitations,
Mm-hmm.
uh, their own weaknesses in terms of their personal development. Expectations are too high, right? They're not fully developed in terms of their financial capacity, their emotional capacity, their intellectual capacity. I say they still have that mummy's boy syndrome as well, right? So they're not really being independent as such.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the first thing, and the A stands for accept. Accept your own flaws, accept your own weaknesses, accept where you need to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just walk in or jump into, a relationship, a marriage, and expect things to kind of just be like, you know, like a wonderful experience to you when you have no idea of who you are first and foremost. So it's really important and imperative that we really dig deep and really get to know who we are first. And this is not just something I've come up with. This acronym is my own. And the reason I've come up with this is because it's exactly what I went through
Mm-hmm.
post my divorce. So the first thing I had to do was accept some home truths, to be honest with you. My own flaws, my own weaknesses, my own, um, uh, not only weaknesses, I think my own denial of those weaknesses as well. So we really have to get to a point within ourselves to accept the bitter pill that's just to swallow. That I'm not really great at communication. I'm not really great at holding my temper, and so on and so forth. So the first thing was for me is to look within myself to accept. Second, the R stands for raise. So raise your vibrational energy. I know we talk about this energy, and it can mean a different thing for different people. But what it means is you now have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Do the work that needs to be done. Sometimes it's something you can do yourself. Sometimes it needs someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I'll personally tell you that I had a coach for almost 9 months who helped me to look at my own weaknesses. So I discovered, because my parents went through a divorce when I was 8, and I had to go to Pakistan with my younger sisters, and I was only 8, and it was an experience in and of itself. But I didn't realize until I worked with this coach that I carried some childhood trauma from that age.
Mm-hmm.
So between the ages of 8 and 10, I had a neglected child syndrome.
What does
Okay.
that mean? How can you how does that manifest in someone's life?
Well, every time, for example, someone said no, and it could have been, you can't have this, or you can't buy this car, or this, it almost felt like that child was being neglected or shoved to one side.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitively, I'm not aware of this, but subconsciously, my mind, my subconscious mind has registered that experience all those years ago, and the body never lies. So those emotions, those feelings would show up themselves. Not unless you're in this field, or not even unless you've experienced the work of a coach or a therapist. You don't know these things. It's not common knowledge as such. So I'd feel neglected for some of the smallest things, but it could be that sometimes I threw a tantrum of sorts, not really knowing where this came from. Even when I came back to the UK when I was 10, I remember my teenage years started. I didn't have any friends. My sister still stayed in Pakistan. I had to go to a language school to learn English again, 'cause I had forgotten my English. And I was bullied at school. And I remember, feeling very withdrawn, So my social circle didn't even exist, right? I didn't have my siblings with me. I had my father with me, and Allah bless his soul. He had his own ways of communication. So I felt totally neglected. So again, between this neglect and withdrawn, states, I didn't know these were playing out in my relationships, and that's not only my marriage, but also my children and colleagues and such. So you need somebody to work with you, So that's when I say that you have to raise your energy by doing the work. And with respect to marriage, if you want somebody up here, right, you have to do the work to get yourself up here as well. If that's what you expect, don't expect to get someone here when you're down here. So I hear often that someone wants a queen, right? And she's this and she's that, and she has everything perfect. She's a homemaker, and she's going to be, good with the in-laws and so on and so forth. But I'm weak. I don't really have the capacity myself to be able to handle those things, as a man. I don't have the emotional intelligence to be able to deal with perhaps the frequency, the friction that comes up, because of that. So we have to do the work to get to a level of what we expect. And the last one is no. You have to get to know the person you're going to spend potentially the rest of your life with. And what I feel on that, Brother Abi, is that sometimes people let their emotions come into the mix first before they really get to know someone. So what happens then is once they get to know the person and they have emotions in the mix, when the red flags show up, we tend to start making excuses for that person, right? And what will happen is we will ignore those red flags, and we will make excuses, and they will come back to bite us. So we have to have a process whereby we really take the time. We're ready now. We know ourselves. We've done the work, and we know the types of questions to ask. And I'll give you my own personal example. And this was before me and Victoria, my wife, got married. We spent 4 months. We was in a long distance relationship, 4 months, and we had no physical contact. So we only had this time to get to really know each other deeply. And I mean really deeply in terms of our likes, dislikes, aspirations. She did a check on me, I did a check on her, and so on and so forth. It was really, I think, very conducive, and it allowed us to really get to know the other person and make a very considered decision as well. And that's the most important thing, is to make those decisions that are considered rather than being emotionally involved. And that's it. You've kind of lost your way, so to speak.
There's so many things that you touched upon that I wanted to discuss, to be honest with you, and so many questions that I have based on what you shared with me. But I'm so glad that you shared these 3 things, because I think they're so important. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the points that you mentioned. You mentioned at one point, and this was along the way as you were talking about this concept of accept and raise and know. And I believe it wasn't during the accept and raise pointers that you mentioned that right now, as men, we don't know how to productively conduct ourselves in a relationship, or we are not taught that, or how to actually approach relationship. And part of it really has to do with the fact that I believe as a society, men are expected to know how to be men intrinsically. We are raised, and because of our gender, because of our private parts, we are men, and that's it. I am a man. I have clearly the machinery of a man and a male, and so this is who I am. But when we really rewind and look at some of the older ways of raising children, and here in Canada, I live in Canada, we have a native people. All right, so we have a native people of the land. Of course, Canadians are settlers here in Canada, so we are not the original people. There were Native Americans that lived here, or Native Indians, whatever they call them, depending on they thought they arrived in India, so they're like, oh, these are Indians, and they weren't actually anywhere near India, right? Just goes to show like the cockiness of of the people there. But anyways, so you have these Native American tribes, and in these tribes, they usually have, number one is that the men are raised by the community, that there are a tribe of elders, and that all men that are older than you have authority to raise you and discipline you and counsel you. And so it is seen that the community raises every child, and that every child is a child of that community and of that tribe. It's not that just, oh, only my dad can tell me this, you can't tell me no. It's no, every elder man has the right to counsel you and guide you. And throughout those tribes, there's a rite of passage. At every point in time, there will be a certain rite of passage that every boy must go through to become a man. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because I found this concept very interesting. And I started wondering, is there something like this that we can find within our deen? And of course, that's the question that I'm going to ask you. But I started looking, and of course, when I think about these thoughts, and I think about how the Prophet ﷺ told us and counseled us to raise our children, he said that for the first 7 years, play with them, then the next 7 years, discipline them, and then the next 7 years, befriend them, right? Okay. And I think one thing, and I'm only speaking from my personal experience, and I might be wrong, but I think I've noticed that with most of my generation today and most of the friends that I have, is that our fathers knew how to provide, and maybe some even didn't, and they felt like their role ended there. As long as they were providing, as long as there was a home and there was food on the table, they were fulfilling the role as a man. And unfortunately, as children brought up in societies outside of our religion and outside of our culture, where we are raised and we can clearly see that we are the other, we can clearly feel it. We were, I believe, not necessarily given the right support system to deal with that environment and to conducively produce, men that understand themselves and are able to really achieve their highest potential. And looking back at this and looking forward, I really do believe that, as being a man is something that is learned. It is not something that you're not born into it. You have to learn how to be a man. You have to learn, what does that even mean? What does that even mean when I deal with my spouse in relationships, or when I deal with others, right? When I deal with my loved ones, what does that mean? Who am I? And what does being a man actually entail? And I'm going to end this off here because I don't want to steal the mic from you, brother, but you're the perfect person for me to open up about this. And I have so many feelings about this. And I think so many Muslim men have feelings similar to mine, where I feel like I had to actively learn how to be a man growing up, and I had to look for those resources. And a lot of times those resources were non-Muslims, because there aren't that many Muslim resources out there that taught you about manhood, that taught you about how to approach relationships and the dynamics between man and woman, and how to build self-confidence, and how to be a man that believes in himself and believes in his potential and is able to bring his best self forward. And I find that unfortunate. That that was the case, and it is no fault of my father's. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him as well. He's a very kind and very loving father, but I can't sit down with my father and talk, and I feel like I have trouble having a conversation of substance about something that I'm going through, because we've never had a relationship on that level. I can't imagine that happening, and I don't know if I ever could do that. And so I'm sharing that with you because I just feel like, we're kind of like there's this we do have fathers, but we're almost missing that father figure in our lives, even though we do have physical fathers that have brought us into this world. What are your thoughts on everything that I'm sharing with you? I'm going to pause here because I can talk forever about this.
I hear you and I feel you as well.
Mm.
Definitely. You know, our father's generation was a different generation, and they were brought up in a different way as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they experienced was what they experienced. Some of it was quite tough, actually, their background.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I noticed when I did some introspection in terms of why was I going through all these different things myself, and pretty much what you were saying, I feel you. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The village does raise a child. It has to, right? It's a collective responsibility. We are part of a community, but it seems to be dysfunctional. I'll be really honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't dysfunctional in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because I remember reading about this and even somebody teaching this as well, that, even in the shura gatherings, there used to be some children in there. And the purpose of that was so they could hear what they were speaking about, and also, garner the wisdom that was being shared as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they had this place not only amongst the elders to learn, but also to feel important as well. And that's the most important thing, because this sense of not only self-identity, but courage that, oh my God, I'm sat with these elder people and I'm listening to something really important, the big decisions here. Wow. And they feel that, importance as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very natural, organic way of creating the next generation of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's one thing I believe that to some extent is missing right now. But coming back to your point, where it comes to one-on-one and where fathers share or can't share, um, you know, my father's passed away, and Allah bless his soul. And the thing is that he wasn't ever able to show emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember asking a friend of mine, well, a brother's friend, about his father, and he cried because he'd never been told his father loved him, and there was this lack of very an emotional connection. One of my top values is connection.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the top value is connection. So I seek connection with the people who I love and the people who I work with. So the people in my inner circle, I need to be connected, and that I have a meaning for what connection means for me. Now, if you don't get it from people who are close to you, you're going to find it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I've learned, that, for example, if someone has a value of belonging and they don't get belonging at home, they'll go find it in a gang.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or they'll go find surrogate fathers on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll start doing the worst case scenario things, right? So we can't take away the need that we have, but we can misplace where we get it from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most important point. That if our own families cannot provide that within the safety of our homes, then invariably what will happen is sooner or later we will start looking for it outside, elsewhere. So we have to break that cycle, and that's the most important thing. What's done is done. What I had to do in terms of the coach that I had, I mean, I have image with me, with my neglected child and my withdrawn teenager. And I'm actually literally, I drew it out. I had to do it as part of the exercise. It was over 8 months. And me as an adult, I have my hands over these two children.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, it's okay. I have you protected. So even though sometimes you'll show up as a withdrawn child or a neglected child, it's okay. That worked for you then. You don't have to worry about that right now, because I'm a mature, wise adult.
Mm-hmm.
But not unless you go through that yourself, you won't be able to have the ability to do things that can help you move forward emotionally. And it's a tough thing, because I've often cried going through the exercises myself, because it's brought up so many deep-seated emotional traps, things that are trapped emotionally.
Yeah.
and they've come up and they've surfaced, but I'd rather have it surface, in a way that's controlled than I'm in a relationship, I'm with somebody and it just shows up itself automatically. So I hope that's answered your question. I think what we need to do is meant that if it cannot be undone, and I know a particularly a brother actually who what he did was he wasn't shown any emotion from his mother, for example. And what he described was that slowly what he did was he physical emotion actually. He used to first go and just touch her on her arm, and then slowly keep his hand a little bit longer, and then slowly but surely he ended up massaging her feet. And for her it was a release. He thought that he was being neglected, but she never knew how to give it because she never received it. And then it so happened that as she started to receive this massaging, she opened up, and they both cried and they both hugged. You see, in this, there's a thing that there's no one to blame sometimes. And that's the most important thing. Sometimes we all are I'm carrying my trauma, maybe my father, my mother's carrying their trauma as well.
Correct.
And I think that's what needs to happen is that we need to break that cycle. And sometimes it might be that I need to go to my mother and say, I love you. Even though she might find it really difficult for me to say that to her. Right. And continue as much as I need to continue to make, a difference. And perhaps sometime it comes back. But yeah, definitely break that cycle with our own children. And it takes a lot of work. It definitely takes a lot of work. And I think that's why the first thing about, accepting is the most important step, because denial will always deny you any progress.
Based on what you're sharing, I think you brought up a really excellent point. And it's in that with everything that I shared, and even more, I've only scratched the surface, but I've had to go through a very long and arduous process of really understanding and accepting. And it's interesting that I go in that direction because one of the first steps in your ARC method is accept. And what I had to really understand and accept to be able to move on is to accept the fact that it wasn't my father's fault, and that he was only doing what he knew, right? Based on the way that he understood and viewed the world, right? He was only, and at some point, I think when you're a kid, you look up to your parents and you look at them and you're like, wow, these are like the perfect human beings. And you have all these super high expectations. You think they're superheroes. And then as you grow and you start to understand that everyone has faults and that everyone is going to go through their own unique life experience, and based on that, they will go through life and make certain judgments and have certain behaviors. And my father went through his own unique life experience, and he is a flawed human being, just like I am a flawed human being. And just like we are all flawed human beings, and there is no such thing as a perfect human being. And to understand that, I think, and then to finally accept and understand that your father is an adult and a flawed human being, just like you are, and you will have your own flaws, I think is what allowed me now to just love him for who he is and to appreciate him for who he is. And I think that is so important, and that it's really important to highlight the fact that while I do share this, and while I think many young Muslims and even just young men in general might feel this way, it's important that we understand the dynamics of the situation, but also, as you mentioned, accept them for what they are and love our parents for who they are, right? Despite the shortcomings.
No, absolutely, I agree. And you've reminded me of what I wanted to say actually before as well, when you said that sometimes they provide bread, and they've kind of in their own way done their thing. And you've heard of love languages, and one of those acts of service. And I actually reflected upon this when I first learned about the love languages, and it was, my father actually was expressing love because he was a breadwinner. Go out. In fact, there was one point where he used to finish an 8-hour shift and do another 4 extra hours. And I'm thinking to myself, and he used to work in an iron foundry, really heavy work. And in that place, the temperatures are really high, so you sweat a lot, and it's really strenuous work. And I thought, he was literally providing for us all and going through all of that to make some extra money to ensure that we had a comfortable life. That was his way of expressing love, because he didn't have any other way of expressing it. That's how I framed it. And I think it's so important. What you're doing is you're framing it. It's important for us to frame it in a way to understand it from their perspective, given that they had circumstances that we will never understand, maybe moving from a different country or being estranged from their family members, maybe parents even, and them carrying that emotional trauma of not being in their homeland, not having their access to their auntie or uncle or whoever they looked up to when they was a child, and all of a sudden now they've been thrust into this huge responsibility. So how do they balance that? Well, like going back to the point, if you haven't been nurtured that way and been, your hand hasn't been held and you haven't been shown what it should look like, then you're going to just navigate and try to find your own way, aren't you, really? Some of it could be spot on and some of it could be a little bit off, so I found, Brother Abi, is my outlet has now been with men. So yesterday I was on a walk with a men's group, and I got a text this morning, and he said that was such a lovely walk yesterday. I didn't realize how I could just be myself in the open air with other men. So this brother, he's been through a lot lately, and he didn't have the outlet of expressing what he's feeling with anyone. He can't express it with children because they have their own things. Maturity is not there, perhaps. But with me and the other men that were there, he was very open, and I've seen, examples of men literally breaking down and crying because it's the first time they've ever had that safe space to be able to be themselves and not feel that they're going to be blamed for being emotional, for even crying, for even saying, you know what, I cannot understand why what this is all about. I can't understand why things are the way they are and why I've been through what I've been through. So it's a very non-judgmental space. Come as you are. Yeah, there's a brother actually has a residential, and it's CAYA, come as you are, and it's just coincidental I've come up with that, but literally he has done it, and maybe it's in my subconscious. But men, come as you are, no judgment, be who you are, however you want to be, and let's have this space, and there's no agenda.
How important is it for men to have, a tribe of men that they can connect with and spend time with? Because that's something actually that I've been very blessed to have in my life. Growing up here, my parents put me in a Muslim school from a young age. So alhamdulillah, I have a circle of brothers, and we are all Muslims. And so we relate on that deeper level as well. And I truly think that as deep as you can go with, other friends that are from different walks of life and different religions, I truly can connect with my Muslim friends in a different level because they understand the values that I have in my life and who I am at a deeper level. And we're essentially a band of brothers. And, we're many young men at this point who, take some time, whether it's every week or every month, to get together and just spend some time together and really just let loose. And I tell my wife as well, because my wife knows this. She knows that, sometimes if I'm spending, as much as I love spending time with her, if it's been like 2-3 weeks and it's just been all my time with her, I tell her, I'm like, listen, I need to go around some testosterone for a bit. I need to let it out, and then I'll be back, So she knows that. She gives me my time to do that. But how important do you feel like that is for men to have that support system and have another type of men that they can actually connect with and be around? Is that important?
It's very important. You've heard of the, being codependent, dependent, and being interdependent. We as couples need to be interdependent. So we need to come together, and we also need to have our own space as well. Yeah. I'm a firm believer of that. We have different energies, right? And we just have those different needs, and it's really important. And I think there's a way that we can connect with the same gender that we can't connect with the opposite gender in that sense.
Correct.
And I think it has to be something that we do regularly, and it has to be done in a way that you do it with people who you identify with. And I think that's the thing that I got when you explaining that they're friends from school. So the identity rallies you around, okay, and that becomes your community of choice, right? You choose to be with them, and that gives you a sense of belonging as well. And then when you have those two factors, the identity and the belonging, then you become yourself. Then you become. And I think that's so important because the walls come down, right? You have this safe space. And if you need to say something, you're more willing to say it, right? Like, so yesterday, a couple of men just said what they felt like. And it was an awesome space to kind of hold that for them because they're struggling, right? We hold that space for that person because we know we need to pull this person through and acknowledge what they're sharing and also say, it's okay, brother. We've got you back. Right. And it's a beautiful space to have. It's a beautiful, I think, experience to have as well, with other men. I think it's integral, to be honest with you.
I completely agree. And in the same vein, I want to ask you a question, because one problem that I'm seeing that is very prevalent in young men of my age that are alhamdulillah, I'm 20 years old right now, and I would say young men that are in their 20s and getting close to 30. I'm almost there, but I'm not there yet, guys. So give me 2 more years. I'll get there. I'm enjoying my 20s while I can, alhamdulillah. But for young men my age, one common problem that I see that is not very often talked about, and that is, I truly believe, almost universal, is the problem with the skewed perception of the opposite sex, and in the same vein, addiction to things like pornography. And I wanted to bring that up with you a bit to know, is that related to what we're discussing here, which is the fact that we are growing up as young men without necessarily being taught how to be a man, and we are living in a society where women are over sexualized constantly. And it's kind of like you have these images flashing before you. You have to be purposeful in trying to avoid the over sexualization of women, even on social media, right? And so, or actually very much on social media. So how do you navigate that? And is this related to what we're talking about, which is this whole phenomenon of not being taught how to be a man?
Abi, I've been studying and researching the high value Muslim man with a friend of mine for the last 3 or 4 months. And we asked several people to kind of feed into that conversation. And we, there's this thing about the alpha male, the sigma male, and there's a high value man. And having a conversation with this brother, and we said, look, Muslims need to be high value. Well, we are high value, aren't we? But we're not really, because there are a few things that need sorting out, right? So, for example, the pornography and the way we see women, perhaps, and the way we treat women as well, to be honest. So we came up with this thing with what is a high value man, and we came up with 11 principles. And one of the things is that the individual has to be a man of faith. It has to be a man of faith. But what does a man of faith mean? Now, if he hasn't been taught, or if he's not seen it modeled for him, what is he going to follow? So our belief is this, that we need to have more adult Muslim men modeling the behavior they expect the younger generation to have. And that's the issue. So we believe right now there's a vacuum in that respect. And that's why we're on this quest to get as much feedback as we can, to speak about it as well, so it becomes normalized. So what happens is people say, oh, they're the principles of a high value Muslim man. I'm actually really poor in 2, 3, 4, and 5. I need to sort myself out. Or even our sisters will look at the high value Muslim man and make a judgment on men and say, this guy is so far away. Maybe he's not for me, right? At the moment, there's no real kind of criteria that makes a Muslim man a high value man. Not that I know of, right? There's no standard that's set yet to say this is the standard you should be at. So the quest is to create some standard to say, here's the benchmark. Guys, you need to be working towards this. Without that, there's a huge vacuum, and everybody's working out what it is or what it isn't, and what they can do, what they don't want to do, and so on and so forth. So yes, the temptations are there, and it's very difficult for the youth, especially if they're kind of trying to save up for a marriage. Buy a house or get a degree or save X amount of money, and then they're going to get married. It's risky, very risky.
It is. And I want to ask you one more question, or maybe bring up another topic that I wanted to touch upon. How do we actually, for someone listening to this, what is the best way for men to prepare themselves for marriage, right? And even for the women that are maybe listening to this as well, what should they be on the lookout for? What are some things that they should be looking out for in a partner?
Okay, so I have the whole ARC thing is built around a full model, actually. So it always starts off with, when you're going to accept your flaws, you're going to have to know who you are first. So you have to go back to a point where you identify your core values. You have to know deep down what really resonates with you. Once you identify your core values, you map those values across different aspects of your life. So are you living these values in your life? So we have the 5 F's, right? So it's family, faith, fun, fitness, and finances, right? How do my values actually, how are they visible in these areas? Because when I'm living my values, I will feel more fulfilled, right? Yeah. So the idea is, once you do a mapping, you can say, okay, I've got 2 or 3 areas here that need working. So I deliberately start to work on ensuring that I am living my values. And then, you do the work, you start doing the work to build yourself up, to ensure that, you're values driven. You look at all the different aspects of these values that really mean a lot to you. For example, for me, it's integrity. I've got to be a man of integrity if I expect somebody authentic, right? I can't be someone who's inauthentic and expect somebody to be really, transparent and honest and all that kind of thing. So I've got to really start working on myself. And then once you've done that work yourself, there's a trick now. How do you get to know someone and ensure that they are a good mesh for you, that they're a good match for you? And this is where the work is. So the first part is you doing the work on yourself, accepting and raising your energy. Now you have to ask questions from that person based upon your values, but not only that, because each one of us will give a different definition to our values. So for example, if I asked you, Abby, how would you describe freedom? What does freedom mean to you?
That's a really deep question. Give me a minute to think about it, if that's okay.
Of course.
I believe freedom, what it means to me, is the ability to act out what you think. So to act out your thoughts. So for example, if I were to think to myself that I want to be a better Muslim, and maybe in that same vein, that means I want to spend more time reading Quran every day, then it's my ability to actually follow through on that. So that ability to control the direction of my life based on where I actually want it to go. So that ability to influence myself in the ways that I want to. And so to live my life in a way that aligns with my body and my actions, and my soul aligns with my thoughts as well.
So what if somebody came along, a woman, and said, my definition of freedom actually is to live in the city of London, right? To be close to where I work and earn £100,000 or dollars a year. See, there's a difference now.
Correct.
Same word. But the way you see freedom, the way I see freedom, are 2 different things. And that's where we're missing the trick. We haven't defined our own values clear enough to be able to know what types of questions to ask. So you would ask, is that, how do you spend your free time? She might say, well, I'm always in the city networking with these dudes, right? You're thinking, oh, my God, my free time's with the Quran. So straight away, you know, oh, right, there's a disconnect here. And that's the key. We don't do the work, inner work, to know ourselves first and how we define these values in our life, to ask the questions. And I didn't ask you a question. This is, how do you spend your free time? I didn't ask you, is your value freedom?
Yeah.
Because if you said yes, then I didn't know how to ask a question and say, oh, yes, brilliant. She values freedom as well. But how you define it and how I define it are two different things.
That's correct.
So that's the key. So that the key is to ensure that, you know, we know ourselves and we know how to ask the right questions to elicit the answers that we need. And that means we have to take the time and not get emotionally involved with someone, because this is a lifetime thing now, potentially, right? We want to live with someone for a lifetime. So imagine someone pushing you towards that way. So they're pulling you towards a city and you're saying, no, I want to go to the rural side of things. I want to relax a bit more. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to choose my life, right?
Yeah.
Around the Quran or my prayers. But she's saying, no, I want to go towards a city and get that freedom by earning lots of money and being financially free. You see how it can be a bit of a conundrum.
Correct. Definitely. And I, as you mentioned, that's why, you know, it is important to have those conversations beforehand. And most importantly, even during the relationship, I think communication is so important. And I'll be completely honest here in that I'm someone who says that, and I truly do believe in it. And I'm in a relationship and I deeply love my wife, alhamdulillah, and we are in a very happy relationship. Alhamdulillah. I'm very glad to say that. I'm very grateful to be able to say that. Very wonderful. At the same time, when it comes to communication, I feel like we're not even 50% to where we could be potentially. And I think that this is something that we are always working on, because just to set expectations here for my young guys who you know are looking to get married, as I agree with everything you're saying 100%. At the same time, it's important for young guys to understand that communication is a skill and it needs to be learned. It is not something that you decide overnight, I want to communicate more, and then all of a sudden you and your spouse are now on this 100% communication level, and you know you're completely open, and this is going, you know, you're able to have all the conversations extremely well. It is a skill that you're going to have to learn. And I'm saying that we're like at 50% because I know how far we could go, and I know the potential, and there's always room for growth, and we could get there, and we're on our way there, alhamdulillah, and we're very happy together. But I also know that we're not 100% there yet. And because we've only been together for now married, alhamdulillah, for almost 2 years, we're still, you know, in the first few years of marriage. And I think those are the years where you're learning how to communicate with your spouse, because every single person has a different way of communicating. And I can see increasingly with every passing month that we are getting better at understanding each other and communicating with each other and being more patient with each other and tolerating each other. And I'm very, very happy to see that, because it is a progression. It is not something that happens overnight. And I wanted to highlight that.
It needs work. Absolutely.
Yeah, correct.
There's a saying that, you know, no great relationships actually are there without work. Every relationship needs work. And I came across something recently. It says every day has to be work. So don't kind of leave it every month or your birthday. Every day is a new day, and every day has to be work in a relationship. You got to keep the curiosity there, and that's the key word for me. Keep the curiosity there, and it's the way you ask questions to go into a conversation, because you're curious about what this person thinks, even about the weather, even about trees, even about the environment, the ecosystem, or whatever your interest is collectively. You know, keep the curiosity alive.
Yeah, 100%. Brother, this was such an honor and a pleasure to have you. Honestly, I think we could probably sit down and have a 3-hour conversation if we wanted to, very easily, because this is such a beautiful topic to have. And I think it's such a great conversation to hold. There's so much that, you know, myself, I'm learning from this, and so much that people listen to this will learn from it. I want to know, and I hate to cut this short, but I want to respect your time as well. Where can people go if they want to, you know, continue to learn more about these topics and learn from you, and even maybe be part of what it is that you're working on? Can you share with us where should people go? What should they sign up to? Please go ahead and share.
Yeah, exactly, brother. So I'm on a couple of platforms. So I'm on Facebook as Tafazal, is my first name, one, the number one. You can connect with me on there. On Instagram, I'm 50.plus because I'm just over 50, mashallah.
Love it, mashallah.
And I'm also on Clubhouse. So I've recently joined Clubhouse, and we have a club called Muslim Love. So 2 words, Muslim Love. So if you join the club, we have a weekly thing, and we'll be having topics such as this of, helping couples to have enhanced connection, and lots of different topics, for singles as well. If anybody really wants to do some work with me, whether you're looking for doing some self work to get yourself ready for marriage, then I have a 15-minute discovery call for everyone, and that's going to be on bit.ly/the Muslim coach. Okay. And it capital T, capital M, capital C, the Muslim coach. And yeah, that's pretty much. So yeah, there's Clubhouse, Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to book a place, then it's the Muslim coach, bit.ly. There you go. Thank you so much.
Perfect. My pleasure. So we're going to make sure to include those links in the episode notes or description. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify, check the episode notes and you're sure to see some of these links pop up, inshallah, so you can go and navigate there. And I do encourage you guys, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you really did feel like you benefited from it, Brother Tafazal is someone that I've encountered only a few months ago. I think we met, and I don't remember if it was from our Facebook group or Facebook profile, but I know it was on Facebook. And mashallah, he took a liking to what we were doing with Ummahpreneur. And then I saw him commenting and interacting, and I was interacting with him. And then I started, I'm like, oh, mashallah, who's this guy who's complimenting what we're doing? That's really awesome. I always love to know who we have in our group. So I go and I check your profile, and I check this profile, and I'm like, wow, this person's working with Muslim men to help them, achieve their highest potential, and now helping them, prepare themselves for relationships. And I just thought this was such a refreshing sight to see, because as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I've went through my own journey of having to navigate how to be a man, and I've had to look up to most of the time non-Muslims for this. And to be able to see a Muslim man that, mashallah, takes care of himself, you look great, mashallah, you look like you're 20, to be honest with you, and you have the right attitude, you have the right personality, and you have this amazing positivity, mashallah, that you bring with you, to come here and to do this and to bring this just was absolutely refreshing. And so I'm so honored that you were willing to join me back in this episode, honestly. And I'm not just saying that. It's not just fluff words. It's not just me trying to be nice and mujamalat, as they say in Arabic. I truly, truly, really appreciate you, brother. Extremely appreciate you, honestly.
I feel honored. Anytime, brother. We can even do it on a private level as well. Anytime.
100%.
I mean, it comes from a good place. I really have a passion for this work. I really want as an ummah to be successful.
I know, and I can feel that. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you success on this mission, so that we are able to be the change that we want to see in the world, inshallah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tafazal. This was an absolute pleasure. I loved every minute of it, and hopefully we'll see you again on the podcast.
Thank
you so much. Take care.